Oh, you settle down. Right, not much to tell today. I've been very lazy, haven't done very much apart from surveying Reddit, as is my wont, clarifying a couple of questions somebody had for me. In terms of actual work, not much. I think, actually, yeah, not much. I did a little bit of writing, mostly. It's been in the head stuff, trying to clarify in my head how I'm going to rework the versioning of the website. That's one thing. And also adding in some more subtlety to the CI/CD pipeline that produces that. Also, looking at the documentation, or not only for this particular project I'm working on now with the SaltStack formula, but in general. Whenever I do anything, I try to generalize as much as I can. In other words, I try to come up with a system that I can reapply multiple times. So, for example, although it's not a particularly popular approach, I like to use something like LaTeX for producing long-form documents. Word processors are just absolute dog shit for that sort of thing. Especially if you've got any kind of complex requirements, like true long form documents where you've got proper indexing. You can have a glossary, you can have a bibliography, you can have cross references. You've got complex document structure. You're going to be reusing components across documents, things like that. As soon as you get into that sort of territory, then you need a document production system. There are a few out there. LaTeX is well, Tech is the granddaddy. LaTeX is the close cousin. When people first see them, they're quite horrified. And don't get me wrong, LaTeX has got many problems. It's an absolutely mind-bending thing to write tech, because it's the only language that I know that is basically macros all the way down, and to that end, it can be a bit of a mind fuck getting it to work. But for simple things, it's fairly trivial. For most things that you want to just tweak, it's trivial. And for most other things, there are already existing packages that you can kibitz and you can reuse. So for the most part, it's not really that big a deal. One of the things I do like about it is that I can get the output in various formats. If I really wanted to do some deep customization, then I would probably switch to using LuaTeX, because it's got an embedded Lua processor which is tied in or bound to the underlying tech engine. So that's probably a more flexible way of doing it. You can write plugins with Python and stuff, or extensions, I should say, with Python. Not really plugins per se. So I mean, there are ways of doing all these things without torturing yourself with doing tech, and it can be a bit of a headache. But it's an interesting intellectual. It's an interesting intellectual exercise, but not one that I would advocate for somebody who is busy. For the most part, you let somebody else figure out the complexities of your organization's setup for LaTeX, and then you simply use whatever they produce. And to that end, I think it's a useful thing. That said, the vast majority of the development stuff, what I would call relatively short form, things like documentation of APIs and things like that, where it's a mixture of code, documentation combined, then something like restructured text is more appropriate. Something like Sphinx is more appropriate with its autodocs. Markdown is good, or restructured text for things like README files. So it's a question of picking the appropriate approach. So for long form documentation, that is, for example, if you're writing a book, I would advocate using something like LaTeX. If you're writing technical documentation, then I would go with Sphinx or another document generation system. Sphinx for me, primarily because it's very much sort of Python based, and a lot of the stuff I'm going to be doing is Python based. But it also has got some good extensions for other languages. So Sphinx is a good choice for auto-generating static content taken from or documenting technical content, and it's quite good for long form stuff as well. It's a good static site generator, even for relatively long form stuff like the documentation accompanying an application for user documentation or technical documentation. Sphinx is a good choice. It's simple enough to generate these things, but it's sophisticated enough that you can actually do interesting stuff with it. And it can be customized, so you've got the theming front end, so it can be integrated. So there's that. So yes, that's so basically that's the choice of technology for doing this cookie cutter stuff. There are READMEs already in there, which are the kind of 30,000 foot, so they can appear on the first page of GitLab or GitHub or wherever that gets published. But I'm going to have a docs directory in which I will put the full documentation. I'll set up a mechanism for document production, so people don't have to know anything particular. They can just type in a few commands and get the documents regenerated. And then when I set up the CI/CD pipelines for the formula, I will add in the documentation publishing, and for that I will do I'm going to use the read the docs template basically for Sphinx, and I'll add in the multi-version because I do quite like that, the idea of tying the documentation in, even if I'm generating it myself, into a nice website with the multi-versioning. So I shall do that. But mostly we're now into testing territory. Actually, that was interesting. There are a number of requirements from, or a number of requests from people for websites that they can go to exercise their DevOps chops. Now, the book I'm writing slowly, I think, is a reasonable framework, because although there isn't a sort of hack the box style website to go with it, what you can do is you can download like the tests. So every section of the book, as we progress through the increasing technicalities, is prefaced by the requirements being expressed as automated tests. And then you can go through and gradually transition those into satisfied tests. The nice thing about that approach is that it doesn't tie you to any particular technology. So for example, if you've got an infrastructure test that says something like provide an SSH server that user XYZ can log on to using using PKI, then as long as you provide such a server with such a service running on it, it doesn't matter whether you've used Puppet, Salt, Ansible, whatever. It's immaterial to that particular test. The downside from a learning point of view potentially is you would have difficulty getting an answer, but that's where the books come in, because if you follow the books, then you'd be following with that technology, and therefore the answer would be provided in the form of the real system that's being developed as part of that book. So yeah, there is that. Yeah. Anyway, right. Given that there's not much to be said, I think I'll call it a day.